and known with the Royal Navy as Battle Squadron Number 5. Numbered 5 ships eventually, but they were some of the earlier dreadnoughts. The United States didn't want to commit its best ships. They wanted to save them for home defense, and also because the earlier ships were coal-fired, but ships like Arizona were oil-fired. Now, the United States has all the Texas tea it wants at this time, but Great Britain does not. So it's much easier to supply coal-powered ships in Great Britain at this time than it was in the United States. And that's why in Europe you see them develop a whole generation of mixed coal and oil-burning ships, while in the United States they just go straight from coal to oil-fired. At the conclusion of the war, Arizona was one of 10 battleships which escorted President Wilson Versailles Treaty. And then she does a tremendous amount of training in the interwar period. This includes standard training, it includes fleet training, it includes the fleet problems, which we're going to talk about in a future video. But a bunch of just standard, normal, humdrum type stuff. She, along with the rest of the battle force, goes from the Atlantic to the Pacific a couple of times during this period. The major thing that really alters the ship is in 1931, she goes into the yard for a major update. And this is when they add extra torpedo defenses. They blister the side of the ship. This is when they add, they remove her original boilers and turbines and replace them with the more modern propulsive equipment slated for the battleship Washington, which was canceled and sunk as a gunnery target. And this equipment is higher horsepower, so even though they're adding more weight to the vessel, she's able to maintain pretty close to her 21-knot speed. They add the extra 1.5 inches or so of armor to the main deck. They replace the original cage masts with the tripod mast and the 3-tiered fire control towers on top. So this is a hallmark of the American interwar battleship. You've probably seen it all the time. The U.S. Navy went from the military mast, as it was called, the single pole mast that the pre-dreadnought type battleships had, to a cage mast at a time when most other countries were building tripod masts. The reason you have masts, a superstructure, spotting platforms, any of this stuff, is so that you can spot the fall of your shot. These battleships can fire their guns over the horizon, and you want to see where their shells land so that you can adjust for your next shot. So fire control and range finding is what's happening at the top of these masts. You don't want to add too much top weight, so with these earlier ships, it is just a mast or a tripod, or in the American case, a cage mast. And the U.S. Navy did gunnery tests, and they didn't like tripods because if a leg of that tripod is hit by an enemy shell, the whole thing can collapse. But with a cage mast, it can have shells pass through it, and it's still going to be able to stand upright. They did a number of tests with these, and they loved it. Then later on, a couple of ships with cage masts went through storms, and the cage mast crumpled on deck because of the weather. And so in the 1930s, you see most of the cage mast vessels
Good luck and fair seas.
replaced with tripod masts.
Roger.
However, not all of them. The most modern cage mast vessels, Colorado and Maryland, still had their forward cage masts at the end of World War II, and still had them when they were scrapped. Most of them had these replaced with either a Citadel-type superstructure, like the Mississippi, New Mexico, and Idaho, a actual tower-type superstructure, like Tennessee, California, West Virginia, or the tripods.
Concentrate fire on the enemy warship.
Nevada and Oklahoma, Wyoming, Arizona, Pennsylvania, and so on. So, the top of the tripod is this 3-tiered tower. The lowest tier was for fire control for the 5-inch guns. built, these battleships didn't have a fire control position for those guns. However, they received what was called the torpedo boat defense stations, which were platforms halfway up the cage mast that had searchlights on them, 4 searchlights each on the forward mast. And these were where you were supposed to do the range finding for the 5-inch guns, and it was also where you would illuminate your target if torpedo boats were attacking in darkness, like the Japanese had done on Port Arthur. Because the cage masts had a single tier on top in Arizona's case. When she gets the tripod, 3-tiered tower, and so the lowest tower is 5-inch guns. The upper 2 tiers were for the 14-inch guns in Arizona's case, and they were for the bird baths where the anti-aircraft guns were added later on in the ship's career. Arizona also had a platform installed on her forward tower for a radar, a CXAM surface search, a CXAM air search radar. Because of a limited number of these in production, while the platform was installed, the ship never received one before she was sunk. Only the battleships California and West Virginia, to my knowledge, had them by the attack on Pearl Harbor. With the Pacific Fleet, some of the Atlantic Fleet battleships like Texas already had them too. Some of the heavy cruisers had also gotten them, as did most of the carriers as they were built. Arizona's only combat action was the attack on Pearl Harbor, when the ship was caught completely unawares. Roughly 10 minutes into the attack, Japanese torpedo bombers flying level over the ship at about 10,000 feet dropped armor-piercing bombs converted from naval shells. These would not have been effective against moving ships, but against ships in port, they were effective. The Japanese used these to target the inboard moored battleships. The battleships were moored side by side on battleship row,
concentrate fire on the
with
target.
the ones on the outside easily targeted by torpedoes, which were far more effective at sinking ships, and the ones on the inside targeted by these level bombers. Arizona really had a rough time of it. The level bombers targeting Maryland and Tennessee didn't have much success. The bombs that did hit did very little damage or were duds. Nevada took a couple of hits before she was able to get underway. Arizona took multiple hits. Several hit the stern of the ship. One bounced off of one of the after turrets. The armor there was thick enough to defeat the bomb. Some were near misses around Arizona and Vestal, the battleship repair ship moored outboard of her. But one bomb, believed to be dropped by a Kate bomber, a B-5N, from the aircraft carrier Soryu, number BI-318, piloted by Warrant Officer Haruo Sato, with Bombardier Noboru Kani, Petty Officer First Class, and Petty Officer Second Class Yoshikazu Hanada manning the radio. This aircraft dropped their bomb, and it hit very near turret number 1, and punched through to the magazine spaces below there, where it either detonated a main battery magazine, a secondary battery magazine, or a black powder magazine which stored ammunition,
All stations
which stored
requesting fire on the designated target.
powder for the ship's airplane catapults and saluting guns. Because of the level of destruction of this bomb hit, it's impossible to know which of the magazines specifically it started in, but the explosion in one space quickly detonated all of the other magazine spaces. American battleships, when they were in port, always refueled and reloaded so that they were ready to put to sea again. Had Arizona been in a West Coast